Welcome to the Global WeSpace Summit, a first-of-its-kind online journey into collective consciousness and practice. For this event, over 150 trailblazing pioneers and WeSpace experts from North America and Europe have been invited to share their latest insights and reflections on this subject. Bringing our best discernment inside these conversations, the many approaches of each WeSpace lineage come to life. As we explore pathways into the collective development and transformation of our lives and culture at this time, we are delighted to have you join us on this journey. So welcome Ria, welcome Greet, welcome Judy, and welcome Luea. It's really a pleasure to have you here share this space for the WeSpace Summit. I talked with Ria not so long ago about how Women Moving the Edge started, I think about 12 years ago, and then halfway through it went through a big shift. And it went from something, I guess, circle of presence, getting into a circle of creation. And a lot changed since then. It's really entered a new way of being and co-creating. And there's been some dissolution, there's been some renewal. I feel that seeing you here on the screen today is a result of all that very long trajectory that started so long ago, and that has gone through a lot of learning, a lot of discovery. And as these women now who have been invited to share about collective presencing, and you're a beautiful example of that for your very strong and deep way of being engaged in that. I would like to ask you perhaps to share what really called you to be here on this call together.
So this is Judy. I like to use a talking piece, and that has been our practice. I'll pick up my heart. Yeah. This practice that has come to be called collective presencing has grown in me and in us and others over a period of quite a few years, as you just mentioned. And so it felt really important to be here, to simply bring my presence to kind of affirm and support, maybe even expand as others take this in, what a gift it is to be able to gather together with others in a time when my sense is I do nothing alone now. A truly creative space is tapping into a field of potential that's held collectively and requires a deep level of presence from each of us. So it's an honor to be here and with these other women, and at the same time I honor all those who aren't here that we've at various times been in circles with. And it feels like, since it really began with Women Moving the Edge, there is a certain element of the feminine as well. For me, it was learning a lot more about how to honor and cultivate the subtle sensing that's in me. to be able to inquire into what I don't know, be curious about that, and tap into something that's certainly not from the rational mind, and feels really important, a quality, a capacity to collectively develop and evolve as we humans come together in a world that really needs a new way of moving and being together. Yeah, that feels actually a lot more natural. So I think that's enough for me. I'll put my heart back and you can hear from some others. Thank you.
This is Ria speaking. You might notice that we are totally okay with silence, and sometimes we give it a certain time, and sometimes we let the silence be as long as it takes. There seems to be, I think, some alignment going on in the silence. At least people become present individually. And probably we also start sensing into each other. So why it is important for me to have this collective call next to the interview you did with me personally is that some of this practice can radiate through this conversation, and as it does already, I think. Yeah, that's why this is important to me, and I will leave it for that for now. And maybe it's not important, but anyway, I want to honor that this technology works wonders, like from Canada to Belgium to Germany to the US to Greece. I mean, this is amazing. We can be in this quality of dialogue and attention. So that's really great. So as we say in our online circles, the talking piece is back into the middle. So somebody else can pick it up.
Yeah, I'll take it. I'm in other We spaces as well, in other groups. But in some ways, the collective presencing group, as it has grown out of the Women Moving the Edge, feels very much at home in a way. And I think it is because there are many reasons. Probably it has to do with the feminine as well. Like Judy mentioned, that it came out of that strong connection among women. And then there is also that quality of really growing along with it. It's as it has unfolded among us, it has been changing, and it has sort of gifted us so much. So it's as if it's informing, it keeps informing us. And as we are talking, or as we are here together, for me, there's other people with us, because it is a field already, and it's as if each one's contribution is different but needed in a way. And even when they're not on the call, I sort of feel some of them with us. And that is special to me as well, because that has that quality of really something that can grow, but also it's something that we can perceive when we're ready to perceive it. It's as if it's waiting for us to sort of be discovered more and more in what it can offer and in what it can be. It has that flexibility, and at the same time there is that depth and that sort of trust among us that anything in a way is possible. And I also feel it's special that we have that strong connection with what is just around us as well, like nature or whatever else we notice, and that it sort of expands that field into something that is woven together, like each one of us is part of everything in a way. And it's, we sometimes mention the power of place. And just right now, when Ria was talking about the technology connecting us and mentioning just the places, the countries, it's already like weaving something together, like sort of bringing it into our awareness that we're really spread out. It's not just we're sitting in the same room, but we're really in different places. We can see where the light is already changing there, because she's further east than I am and further south, but it's still that awareness of this possibility. So that's really precious, or some of the things that are really precious to me when it comes to collective presencing. And I really feel inspired by it and feel it's so precious that I want to sort of be a messenger of what is possible and let people know, hey, this is possible. And this is not something that is, I don't know, it's not totally impossible. It's not that we are that special or that unique or whatever. It's just us. So yeah, peace is back. Thank you.
Yeah, I'm happy to take the piece. First of all, I just feel really grateful to be together, to have online spaces and even an online summit coming up, where we find language for that and where we share it across. So that really was something that drew me when receiving the invitation from Ria, because I feel it's almost like as if we are remembering parts of our collective bodies and starting to train muscles, and to have dedicating space, time, energy, all kinds of resources to give somehow voice and language to that inherent capacity that I believe we all have. I feel it's just so much the soil that I want to co-cultivate with others together. So I'm really in deep appreciation to all the ones who have come before and the ones who now somehow took that initiative and listening to the call itself and formulate a structure that can receive streams and languages and different ways of naming this, what is often very difficult to put in words, because it's right between the subtle and the visible, invisible. Yeah. When I'm talking about remembering, then I really feel this is not something that has just started in the last 10, 20 years. It's actually, I think, a skill that we somehow forgot as humankind, or at least definitely a more Western, Northern, whatever we put on that, depending on how far we want to go back, there is a lot in that, where this somehow either got buried, try to be cut off, forgotten, being feared of. And I think a lot of, if not all, native, indigenous and ancient cultures had, to a certain sense of degree, that capacity and the knowledge that without that, it's not a question of survival, but for me this is normal to be in that space and really listening. What has come? Where are we? And what is the next gentle step? And knowing we cannot do anything we do alone. So I think we have really, in a wonderful way, learned the power of individuality and singular path. And I think what we are witnessing today in many fronts, what we could label as good and bad, or difficult and challenging and tumultuous, or whatever we want to put on that, is actually the invitation to come back to that collective capacity that we all have to truly sense into the answers and the potential together. And for me, what Grit also mentioned, the power of place and the power of land, I think it's there where, for me, now collective presencing is there where I'm holding the questions of how is it related with being in different localities and picking up different elements, and how are they interweaving in such a coherence that we actually then know what's the best for the whole, or the best, or what does the whole want to express as a next possible action, literally, not only listening into, but also bringing and brings also the masculine part in, because I do think this is also the next level of collective being together. Is like, how do we interweave these different qualities, where it's not anymore about feminine or masculine, but where this is just naturally how they interweave. And we know at what time what kind of tendency or quality is more needed and more in service for a whole, or the field, whatever we define that to be. Yeah, I'm grateful to you, Anne, of holding space for and with us, and kind of a witnesser, a sacred witnesser. For me, a new experience to somehow live the practice by somehow being interviewed. So how can we live that while talking about it? Put the piece back.
I actually want to pick it up and build on what Luea said about the probably most likely innate capacity we all have, and that what I call the subtle sensing, and that can be many things. I mean, it can be about the land, it can be about what's next, it can be about a certain quality in the room, or anything that your subtle senses pick up. And then what Luea also mentioned, the whole quest in humanity for individuality, and this is me and this is what I want, and how that in the whole practice of collective presencing also gets interwoven. It's the subtle sensing and the very unique expression of each of us that is needed, and this diversity is needed to see the real new patterns and the real new insights. And I think it's it will, or it is, or it will become almost a necessity of to having this collective capacity to be really grounded and centered, at ease in your uniqueness, and then combine it with others to look at all these wicked, complex problems we have in the world. Yeah, that's one thought that got triggered by you here. Pieces back.
I would take the piece for a moment. Something came to me. You talk about the being at peace with the uniqueness of oneself, and how is it to be at peace with the uniqueness of a we, of a group? I'm feeling this now as we're talking, and I feel how delicate and in a way vulnerable, or perhaps so intimate, is what is emergent. And we're talking about technology, which is absolutely wonderful, that from all these places in the world, we're in this one space now to be able for it to be shared again in various places in the world. And so, as it is being shared so publicly, how is that feeling of sharing that is so intimate and emergent?
I'm happy to take the piece. The word that comes is trust for me. Like, I think I feel I have practiced it, and I had the ability to practice with so many people, or in so many ways, not so many people, but this in itself is for me a field that can hold whatever would now happen if it goes online. I think I feel the we of that practice, and that includes me, has matured so much through many ups and downs and searchings, and being in different processes and focusing on different questions and potentials. It's a strange word, but the word immunity comes up. I feel I have enough, probably, antidotes in my system, that I'm not feeling the vulnerability as a weakness, but more as a natural strength, not in the sense that I'm power over, but more like, yeah, I'm able to, I and the we is able to agilely dance with whatever that would evoke somehow. Yeah, thank you for this question. I wasn't aware actually how intimate it is, and indeed it is. And at the same time, it feels very, it's not just the collective of the five of us now and the ones who have been part of that journey, but it's yeah. Anyway, I put the piece back.
I'll pick up the piece. Yeah, there's something about the, and I hope I can articulate it, about the individuality within the collective. And as Ria said, that's crucially important, that uniqueness, that diversity. And I find maybe one of the practices that's hard for some people is to let go of their own stuff, to let go of being the most important, or having the best ideas, or, I mean, it's way beyond that. And so there's a a cultivation within myself of trusting the field, as Luea said, trusting the group, that whatever emerges here is what's meant to be, whether it's something that came from me or not, or goes along with what I had expected. It's really about totally releasing and letting go of any preconceived notion of what might occur. And requires a level of true grounded embodied presence from each human in the circle, and a willingness to listen, to receive, without any judgment of self or other. I mean, it's like all of that is gone. And that requires some, at least in me, it has required a level of practice over time. Probably the way I mentioned vulnerability, but it's, yeah, there's a letting go of that, of feeling like something's going to happen to me or wound me in some way. There's some greater purpose here that I'm in service of. So it's far beyond my own whatever it is that I want or myself. It's truly in us. And that's where it kind of really becomes alive. And once I've experienced that, which was quite a while ago now, there was no going back. It was no longer about me. It's to be in this kind of space that's just where I want to be. Yeah. So thank you. Pieces back.
To me, it's somewhat surprising what the question does to me. It's as if it throws me into something where I was not, in terms of, I noticed like, yeah, sure, this is intimate. Now that you mention it, yes, this is very intimate. Yeah, you're right. And then I go into like, where and how is this intimate? And it's not me. It's, as Judy already mentioned, it's not about me. It's this space in between or beyond me or whatever. And it needs me, but it's not about me. And by asking that question and having that word and even the vulnerability is suddenly like, oops, do I need to be aware of this? Is there something? It says, it's somehow, it has that certain moment of suddenly becoming for a moment a bit smaller, a bit less in this field. But it's good to become aware of it because it makes things clearer. But it was interesting to notice, like, whoops. Yeah, thank you. Yeah, pieces back.
Yeah, and where it went for me is, I don't remember on how you started the question, but the first half sentence or so brought me to the topic of what I've been naming. There seemed to be collective souls calling. It's in the book I first built on. At a certain point in your own personal development, you feel like there is something you cannot not do. And just yesterday I saw a video from a painter who said, like, you're not choosing your own vocation, it chooses you. Yeah. And that's on an individual level, but it seems to us and to certain constellations, different constellations we have been in, that there is a potential that is calling different individuals to be in this we space, to make that potential that is there, to make that possible. And as we look at the different women moving the edge gatherings, it was not always the same set of people. It was only Judy and me were always there, and then we had more like a European batch of people and a US batch. But every gathering would be different because we need the diversity. But there always seemed to be as if there was something that was calling on us, and it called all of us, as actually, as Griet was mentioning, it asked for our total presence and awareness and attention and uniqueness. But it's not about us individual. It's about this collective potential that is somehow under the surface, and if we don't pick up on it, it cannot be lived or cannot be manifested. So I call it collective souls seem to be, I don't know, be present or more present than ever, or I don't know, but that's how we could articulate it in a way. Pieces back.
Yeah, and building on that, what you just said, Ria, I think there is a very subtle difference, and I sometimes don't feel, I think I get the words right, but it's not that we found each other and then we hook on each other and kind of create that safety of the we space, which I feel somehow hearing the we space as a word gives me more that sense of communities that now we found each other, now we stick together and become almost like, could become a tribe or a cult or a clan, or and it's not that. It's really that you know when you need to step forward, and you know when your voice or channel or whatever unique tone can drop back, and you might meander to another constellation of some sort. And that for me is really what has been shared already before, that where we are really present to what serves most. And sometimes it's not me, so and that's good. Then I can lean back and I can hold space for others to bring in their voice or their tone more fully. So it's this kind of the image that I get is this kind of rhizome mycelium sort of connection, where you know when you need to be active and when you need to be even silent, because that might be the best service that you can do for the whole. I put the piece back.
Yeah, I don't know yet whether I can put it to words, but some of what Luia just said has a strong resonance, and it's as if I've never sort of realized it in the way you put it, that it is so transparent in a way. It's this mycelium or whatever the word is, that, or something that we know about one another, and but still that's not what it's about. It's, and looking at the constellation that we have now here today, it's a bit similar. It's in a way maybe even an example of it, because we've never been in this constellation apart from Anne. Even the four of us others, we haven't been in this constellation. But for this call, there's something in me that assumes this is perfect. It's not missing anything. That's what's being called for. And it's as if that already sort of, that's why I'm not sure that I'll have the right words to express it, but it already sort of takes it away from us in terms of it does need us. It's very obvious. We need to be here. We need to talk, listen, sense, whatever. But even within this calling, it's already showing that it is beyond us or behind us or whatever. I don't have the word, but it's already showing what you were stating. I don't know whether it's clear enough. Maybe someone else can continue with the thread I put back to peace.
And I just want to pick this up, like this, what you said, like, I'm not sure I will find the words. Is exactly what we have been doing all along in collective presencing, and we call it sourcing. You speak from something, from source, like from somewhere you get something, but your mind has not processed it yet. So it's not something you remember from last week or from last year, but it's an insight that is totally fresh in the moment. And you try to, as much as you can, to find the right words to express what you're getting with your body. And Jean Gendlin speaks about, we have a felt sense. And so that's what he was having, a felt sense, and then trying to find the words. And Gendlin says, you can learn how to articulate that. And he gives the example of a poet who writes a poem and uses a word in a sentence, and he or she knows it's not the right word yet. And at a certain point, while working on the poem, at a certain point, the word will be there, and there is an inner sensing of, this is the word. And so what we do in collective presencing and with this sourcing, we try to collectively source, not just one by ourselves, but to do that in the collective together. And so you will have many times when people are like, they pick up a talking piece and they say something, and then, yeah, I don't know, and they put the talking piece back. And then we would invite them, like, please keep your talking piece and try to speak on the spot, instead of first figuring it out in your head and with concepts and then speak it. So that was a nice example of how we function in collective presencing mode. Peace is back.
And I just want to mention something that there I'm losing with my tracks, but there is something about when I'm on my own, even though I have these experiences and I myself somehow know how it works when we are in a group. If I'm on my own, I have a harder time. And while writing, when I have somehow something that is my partner, let's say, then something is flowing. And that's still a wonder for me, or like, this is, I feel for me, this is not a singular process. It's not something that you could say, okay, you can also do it on your own. Yes, you can, of course, if you have an intimate relationship, being it with an empty book, and writing is a tool, or artists who have their whatever, paint or sculpture or other digital media, but it seems for me it's that there is a relational aspect in it that is core to that what Ria mentioned as the source can come into existence. So it's not a needing of dependent, but it's that interbeing and that interdependence, that relational aspect that makes it only possible. It's as if you need kind of a space that is held together. I don't know if that yeah, and put the piece back.
It probably has to do with the witnessing somehow. That is a big quality that we use in collective presencing, the witnessing of each other's uniqueness, but also the witnessing of whatever is going on or whatever comes from outside the circle, and it relates to what Judy said, is with no judgment. I mean, we witness, we are totally present and aware with whatever is going on, even if huge, big stories from the world out there come in, or trauma, it might be that is the page you write on, or might be like a witness, something. I'm not sure. It's the first time I think of that in that way. Yeah. Pieces back.
Yeah, I think that's one part, the witnessing. And then at the same time, the uniqueness comes in as well, because if I look back at meetings of Women Moving the Edge or the monthly online calls, you get to know one another in terms of knowing someone will tune in more into certain aspect or perspective or way of picking up things. Someone will have the astrological part to be there available, or whatever. It could be anything, but we get to know one another in that. And it's not as if now you need that contribution, but you know that can sort of add to what is already there, and makes it even richer than at that moment. So that's more the uniqueness, but on another level maybe. So it's not just the relational part of it, and not just the witnessing, but the multi-perspectiveness, and not just like this, but even like on those levels. Yeah, pieces back.
And there's one, I'll take the piece. There's one thing that I don't know that it's been fully articulated that I feel is really gives collective presencing its essence of power, really, is being an inquiry about something we don't have an answer for. It's being willing to not know, to go or think or sense or intuit or know or wait for whatever that is to emerge, usually with a powerful question that leaves a lot of room for all kinds of potential to present itself. So I think that's one of the keys to tapping into this field of potential, is the openness and letting go of our preconceived ideas and ways of seeing the world is quite a large task sometimes. And to be willing to just see what shows up in the group, that's often a huge aha. And that's quite magical. And so, I want to name that. Thank you. Pieces back.
Do you have more questions, Anne?
I'm just sitting in that aha right now. It's as if you invoked all the times there's been an aha, and some part of me can sense that, and there's a rejoicing happening. I guess, Ria, earlier you said there was a first part to my question earlier, and I feel that it was being answered in so many different ways. I guess it was the part around the uniqueness of we, if there is such a thing as a uniqueness of we. And now with all that has come through, I also feel there is a non-attachment to the specific parts of a constellation, and there's just a we space that isn't composed of a certain group, but that is a field that can move and can travel. And is it right to say that it's a field that is in service exactly of that, of what needs to be felt into without absolutely needing to find an answer for it? The pieces back.
I think Judy was already pointing in that direction, which is collective presencing is indeed always a collective inquiry. And so we would take huge effort to articulate a question, but the question points to a layer beneath and that, or underneath, and that's the potential that we sense. And that's part of how we look at it, that there is so much potential in each of us, but also in when we have come together around something, and sometimes we sense we need to do something together, but we don't even know what exactly. That potential, that's kind of, I see it as just under the surface. And if you try to articulate a question that is meaningful to all of us, of which we don't know the answer, but it's a real question, then engaging with that question in the next conversation or in a gathering or in a meeting brings some of that potential to life. And I think that's, I would say it's almost the focus or the goal of collective presencing, if we can say so. Part of an answer to your question.
Yeah, I think there's always something that points beyond the conversation or beyond the collective presencing and the question as such. It's as if someone, I think Luea used the image of training your muscles. In a way, it's a training ground. It's something, the more you do it, the more you sort of get familiar with it, and you can sort of take it with you in other contexts. And like Ria illustrated or pointed out before, when I was sort of trying to express what I sensed or what I could feel as a new insight, getting used to that, getting used to noticing there's something that I'm getting, and my mind is not yet there, but I do want to try to catch it, so to say, before it disappears, as if it's a dream that would just pass by if I don't catch it. And so in that way, it's really training a capacity and an attitude. And at the same time, there is something about it, like you mentioned just before, you said, like, I've got so many answers in between now to my question. We forgot in a way about your question, to be honest. I did. But that's not important, because my mind doesn't have to remember that. It's there. You put it out there, and it was a real question. It was really something you wanted to hear something about. And we sort of started weaving and followed what we sensed without staying on that mind level. And that's the function of the question anyhow, in a way. It's pointing us to more, to something deeper, to something beyond it. And it helps to move beyond this conversation in terms of what we're doing is, in a way, weaving this whole thing, because the field doesn't just appear. That we are talking about a field and about trusting this field and knowing the others are there, and when do we step forward, and when is there something that calls us. That field has been created in a way through our awareness, through the sensing, through the training. So all that is part of the function, or the I forgot the word you used in the question, but like, it serves creating that field. It serves making that possible. It serves, probably it makes us more capable over time to tackle more and more difficult or complex issues, because we start small and we're not that ambitious in terms of, we're happy to just do this. It's not that something has to come out of this. We know this is precious. This is of value. We know we want to share some of that and make that visible in a way. But it's not as if this is an aim, an intention that is set. And that makes it so, I don't know, so rich, so open in a way as well, and so rewarding. There's something that, before there was something, there's something like sacred in just being in that space. It's as if it's realigning each one of us, and the whole possibility of doing this is a realignment and has that sacredness to me. Yeah, peace is back. Thank you.
Well, I'll pick up the piece. And as you were speaking, Grit, I also could feel the sense of it takes as long as it takes. It's a very slowed down space in many ways. And as Ria said, we are used to silence as part of that. And so it's not like, at least the way I was trained in organizations and so on, there has to be a result and we have to find out what it is or what the answer is and move on and do the next thing. It takes as long as it takes for that to show, for whatever is trying to emerge, to show itself and to feel the resonance of that in our collective body, so to speak. And that's when true kind of natural, organic action, movement can take place. Yeah. So I'll put the piece back.
And building on what Judy just said, I experienced that if we practice that, it's actually on the long run more efficient than these kind of more traditional project planning and, okay, what do you want to achieve and what is your vision and what is our vision? For me, there is a very important shift between and it goes also to somehow resonates with what your question was. There's a huge difference between what I think or what I want to see happening, and letting go and listening to what wants to happen. And I can still see how even in social change movements and innovation and all these kind of people really searching for that new, there is still like, I want to realize that dream, or I want to see that vision coming into existence. And that's I could feel from the moment I dropped whatever I want to see myself becoming, or the project or whatever, and just really staying in that, what wants to happen. Life really dances with synchronicity with you, and things start to happen that you would never ever imagine that it's even possible. Yeah, and that's for me. It's yes, it is service, and it's just also that's how life works. I am blocking the stream of life more if I'm putting a vision onto that, what I call future, either for myself or a project or a group of people, because I'm somehow limiting the frame how it should appear. But the expression of it and the manifestation might be even more powerful in a way that we could never have dreamt of. So that's where the co-creational part really comes into play, where you really dance with the not knowing, not as a blockage, but more as the amplifier for that what's already actually as a potential existent under this kind of layer of surface of between visible and invisible. And that capacity to be in that collective presencing is for me just in a way train the different ways and the many ways of knowing. So to not reduce just that part, that is also important, but there are many other aspects and ways of knowing that need to be kind of reawakened and reactivated and trained again. Put the piece back.
I take the piece. Luea just mentioned the co-creating, and in the way you described it, it became obvious in a way that it's not just creating among us, but it's co-creating with not just the not knowing, but with forces and synchronicities and potential that we are normally not aware of, and that can show up if we are open to that. And that links into what we were talking about before, when we said there is that other level sort of calling those individuals at that point to be brought together to create something. That's that part where that is in a way selecting, calling, bringing together, making visible what is possible. And yeah, links into that. Thank you. This is back.
I hear that there's no particular protocol with being with the not knowing, and that being with the not knowing has to do, how can I say this, like the particular process that each unique situation brings in the particular process perhaps needed cannot be known in advance either. And that too is in the realm of the unknown, with which process to engage.
Most of the time we sit in circle and work with circle practice. And when we engage with them, I call it the not knowing yet, because it's not the not knowing of, oh, there must be somebody somewhere who knows the answers, because we engage with things where there are no straightforward answers, not even by experts. So it's a not knowing yet. And the biggest training is to relax in that and not fall into the trap of, oh, we need a solution now, or let's do something, or to kind of get rid of that tension. For most of us Western people, it's a big tension if we don't know the answer, you know? And we might just be silent, or somebody has an idea or an impulse to go for a walk, and if that resonates, we all go for a walk, or we have been painting and drawing and all kinds of things to bring that other parts of knowing into the mix and into the synergy. So no, there's no standard protocol.
I think there is also the aspect next to not knowing, embracing complexity and uncertainty. That is for me highly is the element in a way why we need these new muscles, because the world has always been complex, but it seems becoming more complex, and maybe we are less trained to deal with uncertainty. And that expert part is highly needed for some aspects where there is more linear solution, question, solution, answer, and action possible. But for a lot of things, that seems not anymore really the most sustainable or effective way to go. And I think what we do with collective presencing is on acknowledging that complexity exists. So that's the first thing, to not be in denial of it, embracing it, and also knowing that there is an uncertainty that comes with it when we know that there are so many multi-layers and dynamics and factors and aspects and whatever we call it playing into. And how do we navigate? And I think that's where the collective body comes into place, knowing that in complexity, the singular path and navigating as a singular is not really possible, probably almost dangerous to a certain extent. So how can you as a whole, or as a we, hold that multi-layeredness and stack up through different ways of knowing? Because certain answers need the mind very strongly, but for other layers we need to have the other knowings as well at the same time, in a way, present. So it's almost like I have a background as a craniosacral therapist next to others, and there we call one element is the stacking, where you stack the different levels that need kind of call for a release together, and you're just present with that. And then there is a moment where when this realignment happens, when there is somehow a breathing out happening. And I think that's somehow what I feel we are doing with I sometimes feel when we are in this collective presencing space, we're actually doing cranio, but more with the collective body. That speaks to me because I have that background. Of course, I'm not saying that counts for everybody. That's just my metaphor. Yeah, but it's really about this navigating and when you're not, where you're not only navigating on one level at one time, but on multiple levels at the same time. And that needs a field to be held as a field and a container. And yeah, I stop here. Put the piece back.
Turning on some lights.
I happen to also be a craniosacral practitioner, so this talks to me a lot. And there's also something else in craniosacral therapy. The way I've learned it here is actually there's some kind of protocol in craniosacral therapy, the way I've been taught, and there is a part that is called do nothing, which is not the same as deep listening. And at the beginning, for me, it was, how come that's different? For me, the listening and doing nothing, I couldn't articulate it. And the more I've been articulating it, the more wonders start happening, actually. And from what I hear from the collective presencing that you practice, there is that very strong or deep do nothing.
I think you got it. We have to train a lot to do nothing. Practice a lot. Yeah. Maybe this is a natural end of our conversation, or
I still have one question out of curiosity is, are you, at the moment, are you steeped in such questions, in a being with a question? Are there many at the same time? Is there one particular that you are really involved with?
you mean as a group or each of us?
I would think each of you, if you're part of various constellations.
I can share you my question, which I shared in the previous circle, so Judy and Louis have heard of it. I had a situation in a group of 4 where somebody proposed a kind of very natural step for us. Not a big deal, not a big thing, just a little step. And he proposed it with the words like, if we are courageous, we could do da 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 da. And I was so struck with that. Like, how come we feel that we need to be courageous to do the natural, spontaneous next step? And um, I guess it has to do with we tend to be observer, or we tend to be on the side of life where we know everything. And then comes like one little step, like we call it on the edge, but it's basically just the natural next little step. So I'm looking at that these days because it fascinates me. How come we are so far away from that being in life, like children who just play and go from one piece of play to the other, and they're not planning, they don't feel like they are on the edge. So yeah, it's my question these days.
Yes, my questions are connected with the circles of wisdom, where I feel the call to try to find out how this capacity can be built and can be trained so that more people just have the experience and become aware of that capacity. And also, how is that possible without too much preparation in terms of framework and rules, and just in a way having them become part of that field in a way more in terms of transmission than in terms of teaching. So yeah, what is possible when it comes to that? That's the question that I'm holding, and yeah, trying to find out more about it and sense into it. Yeah, pieces back.
Yeah, I don't know that I can articulate the question really well, but I have an experience of within myself, how do I bring something like this, or that can begin to grow into this, into other contexts or other groups? And there's one where it fits especially well, and yet, people are in a different place. And I'm part of a group that's part of a larger work for Otto Scharmer and the ULab. And there's a local group here, and now this is being galvanized kind of at all the so-called impact hubs around the world. And there's a tendency in using Theory U to want to get right to prototyping or jump there pretty fast. And there's a small group here that we've been working together, and we begin with a check-in, and we often have a question and do a check out, which is part of our closing. And so it's a little bit there. And so I'm just kind of in myself wondering, because I don't sense that I want to or should or need to, or that they're open to having me tell them how to do it. That's not how it's going to happen. It's going to emerge naturally. And so when this larger group begins in the fall, how will this smaller group maybe seed something into that? I'm not sure. I'm just kind of with it. But I see the potential there to build on some very large work and to actually be at the kind of seeding potential, discovering potential point for various prototypes. Pieces back.
I think for me, the question that weaves through different circles that I'm part of, like kind of as an underlying question, is like, we always talk about change or always to change and transform, and as a society, systemic shifts and changes and so. But how do we do that as a collective body? Acknowledging that many people are individually on their transition path, or as transition towns, but what really does it take to get from what we know to a place that we don't know yet how it will look like, and what is that, in a way, space in between, and that transition that is required as a collective. And there, for me, the collective presencing is somehow the core practice, or the core way of showing up. And but there are different, I see that there are different steps that are required to acknowledge and integrate, that I'm trying to find language for, or bring together again aspects for this question: how do we do collective transitions, and really live from a more fragmented world into a more interwoven and interrelated state of being, in a way, because it is interrelated. That's a fact. But to more get aware again. Put the piece back.
Maybe we can end with a quote, which I cannot find back immediately, but change is not changing from one manifestation to another, but from a potential to the next thing. It's not the right words, but somewhere it's in the book, but I don't remember where. So. Back to you, Anne.
Thank you. Well, does anyone want to add anything to this? I feel it's also, thank you so much, especially who you are in Belgium and Greece. It's already night there, so I feel we're really honored to have your presence. It's beautiful, as we're talking about technology, how it can bring us like this in the same space, audible, visible. And I'm aware, and I acknowledge the time differences. And so thank you for having made the time to be here together. I feel there is so much richness in what has been shared. And it gives a beautiful window with the questions that you just shared into some potential on its way. So I'm really grateful for this time that has been shared. And may it be well spread, well received by our listeners during the summit. And for now, well, may all of these questions continue blossoming and finding their very unique way for you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you. Goodbye.
Be well.
Bye. Be well.
And I'm looking forward to see how the summit as a plant is growing and sparkling others. So
yes,
and it's a good deadline to have my book finished by then. Yeah, they all know how long I'm writing on the book.
I can't wait to read the last chapters.
Bye.
Goodbye.
Thank you. Bye.
Thank you for joining us on this collective journey. To sample more speakers from the Global WeSpace Summit, tune into www.thewespacesummit.com. Here you will find over 150 trailblazing pioneers and WeSpace experts, as well as 26 catalysts convening these conversations at the next edge of collective consciousness and culture.